Good morning, good afternoon, evening, everyone. How are you doing today? Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, and we are back with Dana from Hemlane. How you doing, Dana?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Absolutely. Well, hey, you know what? It is leasing season for much of the country, so I thought we should have a conversation about how to price your rental. I know you have some thoughts on that, so why don't we start there?
Yeah, we get this question a lot, right? Of people saying, how much is my rental? How much is it worth? And there's kind of three schools of thought of what you can do,
Mhm.
and three ways to analyze. The first is just to say, okay, this is the rate that it's rented at historically. And here's inflation, here's a CPI, here's how much it should rent for now.
Mhm.
The other one is going towards a more micro level of saying, okay, here's what rental rate trends have been over time. And based on those trends, year over year, this is in our area, how much the rent should be. The third one is actually my favorite because I don't think any of that matters, especially to a tenant if you put yourself in their shoes. And the third one is just saying, let me look on the market for other rentals similar to mine.
Yep.
And what are they renting for?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, that's a tenant's experience. And you always want to put yourself in your customer's shoes, the tenant, of what are they doing? They're looking on Zillow, they're looking on Craigslist, they're looking on Zumper, they're
Mhm.
looking on all of these websites, and they're going through and checking out listings. How do you make yours attractive? Well, the number one thing is price versus what they get. And so I always do that. I go into Zillow. Zillow has, I think, the best user interface for it, at least in my opinion, but
Sure.
people can use others. Type in the address, then I type in number of properties, I filter down, and then I zoom in on the neighborhood and I click on each property and I see what are all of those renting for.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the initial step of gauging how much you should put it on market for.
I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, it's funny you bring this up. So as you know, you're part of my course, How to Get Started One Rental at a Time. You're part of a bonus section called self-management, right? You built a 30-day trial, every day, do this, do that, awesome stuff. But you share that section with a gentleman who has a strategy called the binder strategy. And essentially that's it. He actually produces a binder, which is kind of old school, but it's basically just what you've done, right? Takes listings out of Zillow or Zumper and all of that. And he basically brings it to the tenant, especially at renewal time, and says, hey, if you were going to look to move and you wanted a like investment, this is likely what you would pay. And what he uses the binder strategy for is he actually gets the tenant to ask for a rental increase, and most of the time a longer lease. Like, for example, let's say the strategy says, you know what, I should raise rents $300.
Yep.
The tenant most of the time will go, hey, I'll do 200, but I'll sign an extra year, for example, which he accepts because obviously a turn is more than that. So it's funny. Yeah. In today's world, you should assume your tenants are doing the same things you are. They're looking online. They know what the comparable is. And the other thing I would tell you about, especially this year as a landlord, at least for single family homes, historicals don't matter.
Yeah.
CPI doesn't matter. The historical $50 a month or year raise or $10 or whatever doesn't matter. I have seen rents on single family homes explode like I haven't seen in 20 years. It's People want space. They want an extra bedroom. They want their dogs and their kids in the backyard while they're doing their Zoom calls. If you're using anything but actuals, which is what you described, Dana, you're going to be under market.
Yep. Yeah. And then the other thing I would say with it is that you really need to, once you price your rental, you need to bring it to market
Mhm.
and mitigate any other risks that potentially would be a reason of why you wouldn't get tenant inquiries.
Mhm.
And so if you go to market and after a week you have zero leads,
Yeah.
you have a problem. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
it might be different if you're in luxury. That
Maybe.
that might be a different story, but no one on this channel, I think, is investing there.
No.
And so you do need to go and say, okay, how can I confirm that everything else is good in my listing? For example, you need good photos, right? You need to make sure your advertisement really shares all of the perks of being there,
Mhm.
close to public transit, whatever it may be. And then maybe sure that you're not, people are like, no pets, no this, no that. And it's like, oh gosh, you've 50% of tenants have pets,
Yeah.
from that perspective. So making sure you're not too restrictive on the advertisement, and making sure you advertise it out everywhere. If you put it on one listing website, tenants don't know to go to that listing website. They're going to the top 5 or 6. So make sure it's on all of those. But then after all of that is said and done, if after a week you say, yeah, I have everything in my listing, checks those boxes, I'm competitive, and I don't see any tenants, and it's been a week, you need to make sure that you reduce that price.
Yeah, exactly. Check yourself. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. And then what's interesting is I've seen some markets operate differently. I've seen some markets that are still very broker dominated. I see this in Texas.
Sure.
And it's interesting. We'll do it not on the MLS, and then do it through an agent on the MLS. And suddenly the same exact listing will get more leads. And that just doesn't happen in California. In California, you have it where you don't need to list it on the MLS. Every tenant's on those listing websites. So there might be some market things that I would put as a caveat. But it can be emotional. If your property is on the market for over 30 days, you become emotional and start making the wrong decisions of who to select. And so I just think the most important thing is making sure that there isn't that, oh, I'm freaked out. It's almost like, it's sort of like when you're running out of money, you make decisions that you wouldn't normally make.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when your property's on the market too long, you take a bad unqualified tenant. It's much better to reduce the price by $100 and get a qualified tenant versus to keep it at the price that you have just because you think you could get that. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, a couple of mistakes I made earlier in my career was, instead of lowering rent, I lowered quality, right? I made my box bigger for a yes answer. And that, I don't know what it is, but that never worked out well for me, at least as I remember. Just lower rent, right? Lower the rent and get in there. And again, when you're talking about leases and lease up and then renewals, those are all things you have to think about as a landlord. And you put that in the POC, right? In the POC that you built, that 30-day trial, it's all in there. So if you're thinking about being a landlord, there's a link below. I actually put it in the free course, the POC document, which you created. And if you're in the paid course, there's actually, I don't know, an hour of material of you going through each step. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, folks. Again, if you're being a landlord, you got to price it right. You got to get those renewals in, all those good things. So Dana, where can people find this POC?
Yeah, you can go to obviously the YouTube channel, but then when you want to try out Hemling for 30 days for a free trial, it's www.hemling.com, and you can basically walk through a 30-day trial of what we offer. We offer both leasing tools as well as management tools, 24/7 repair coordination, and leasing agents. Awesome and stuff. Don't forget to mention one rental at a time, because you do get 20% off your first year.
Oh, look at that. Thank you very much, Dana.
Great. Thanks so much.